The grand chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with anticipation, its transparent dome offering a view of 12 moons, their soft glow reflecting on the polished surfaces of the room. Representatives from the galaxy's most prestigious species were seated in an intricate arrangement, waiting for the High Counselor Thir to begin. As he adjusted his ceremonial robes, the shimmering fabric catching the light, a calm yet stern voice filled the room. Thir stood before the assembly, his 4 eyes blinking in rhythm as he surveyed the gathered council members. Today, we discuss the most peculiar species we have encountered in our 10,000 cycles of exploration. The humans of Earth, Thir began, his voice resonating through the chamber. The holographic display behind him flickered to life, showcasing images of Earth, children playing in parks, scientists immersed in their work, and artists creating stunning masterpieces, all peaceful, all harmonious, all utterly misleading. As your appointed observer, I spent 3 Earth years among them, Thir continued, gesturing toward the images. And I must say, they are the most contradictory species we have ever encountered. A murmur rippled through the assembly, the Zentar crystals chiming in harmony with the amusement of some council members. When we first detected their transmissions, we expected to find a war-torn world, but instead we found this: peace, cooperation, and diplomatic gestures. He paused, allowing the implications of his words to settle in. The hologram shifted to show scenes of humans welcoming alien delegations, sharing their culture, their science, their art, acts of kindness, and mutual exchange. The council members nodded in appreciation, but Thir's expression darkened. We thought we had misunderstood them, he confessed, his tone growing more somber. At first we believed they had evolved beyond violence, that their peace was a product of enlightenment. But we were wrong. They hadn't evolved beyond violence. They had simply regulated it. The council chamber erupted in confused chittering and crystalline discord, the Zari Elder's surface facets clouded with concern. A representative from Mayan raised a tentacle, his voice thick with curiosity. What do you mean, Counselor? If they have regulated it, does that not suggest a peaceful nature? Thir's upper eyes narrowed, a reflection of deep thought. No, he said, his voice hardening. What we failed to understand, what we almost missed entirely, was that humans had not achieved peace through enlightenment. They had achieved it through regulation. The Geneva Conventions. The hologram flickered again, showing a simple document titled Geneva Conventions. This, he said, with a sharp gesture toward the screen, is the true nature of their peace. The chamber fell silent. The council members were stunned, processing the idea that humanity had crafted rules to limit the destructive potential within themselves. Thir's voice softened, almost wistful, as he reflected on his time among them. We thought their controlled behavior was innate, but instead it was carefully maintained, an active effort to suppress what they knew they were capable of. And it is this restraint that makes them both fascinating and, perhaps, terrifying. As the council digested the revelation, a deep sense of unease settled over the room. Thir had opened a door to a truth far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. What was humanity truly capable of, and what would happen if that restraint were ever broken? The council had yet to learn the true depths of the mystery surrounding this enigmatic species. And as Thir's words echoed in their minds, one thing became painfully clear. They had only just begun to understand the true nature of humanity. The Galactic Council sat in uneasy silence, the weight of Thir's words pressing heavily upon them. For the first time in their history, a species had arrived on their doorstep, seemingly peaceful, yet with an undercurrent of something far more unsettling. Thir's assessment had cast humanity in a light no one had expected, And as he continued to elaborate, the assembly grew more uncomfortable with each revelation. His voice carried through the chamber as he recounted his experiences, the hologram shifting to display images from Earth's first direct contact with the Galactic Council. The first landing had exceeded all expectations. Humans had approached the Council's ships not with weapons, but with open hands, carrying gift baskets filled with samples of their foods, cultural artifacts, and data tablets with greetings in over 4,000 languages. The representative from Nebulon pulsed a soft shade of blue, a mark of approval, as the humans' polite and thoughtful gestures were seen as a model of first contact. But the more Thea observed, the more he began to question the perfect image that humanity presented. The hologram showed humans and aliens working side by side in laboratories, sharing meals, attending cultural events. It seemed like the most peaceful species the galaxy had ever encountered, and yet there was something missing. Something Thear could not quite place. Their technological advancements were impressive, but they were not threatening, he mused, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. They had no outward signs of aggression, no outward signs of the violence we expected to see. As the display continued, showing the early days of humanity's cooperation with the Council, Thear's doubts deepened. We saw them as eager learners, as peaceful partners, he admitted. Their scientists were brilliant, their medical advances incredible, their artistic endeavors inspiring. But then, we began to notice something strange. Every human achievement, every technology they shared had dual purposes. The hologram shifted to show the human spacecraft, civilian ships designed to meet all safety regulations, but easily convertible to military uses. The medical technology, lauded for its advancements in treating trauma, had been honed over centuries of treating battle wounds. Their peaceful-looking cultural centers were designed with reinforced walls, capable of withstanding attacks, and their art, though breathtaking, had hints of aggression buried within. We missed the significance of these details, Thear continued, his voice heavy with regret. We thought it was human paranoia, but in reality, they were preparing for something much more dangerous. The chamber grew still as the full implication of Thear's words sank in. The representatives from each species shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their minds racing. The display now showed a young human researcher, Dr. Rachel Chen, enthusiastically explaining Earth's quantum compression theories to a group of Zanari scientists. Her work advanced our understanding of quantum mechanics by decades, Thear said, his tone betraying a note of admiration. But even as he praised the humans' scientific contributions, he couldn't help but recall the lingering thought in the back of his mind. How was it that such a peaceful species could so quickly grasp alien technology with military application? Every interaction with them, he continued, was calculated. We thought it was driven by a genuine desire for knowledge, but it was far more strategic than we realized. Their military capabilities were hidden beneath layers of politeness and diplomacy. The room remained silent, each council member processing the information that had been laid bare. The human facade of peace, once seen as a strength, now appeared as a carefully crafted illusion. Thear's final words left them shaken. They had always known what they were capable of. We only learned to recognize it once it was too late. The moment was heavy, and as the council members looked at one another, the questions they had kept buried were now impossible to ignore. What did humanity want from them? Was it peace they sought, or something more? Could they be trusted, or was this merely a prelude to a far greater conflict waiting to unfold? The hologram flickered one last time, displaying a single image. Captain Alexandra Steele, the human marine who had arrived at the Galactic Council's Cultural Exchange Center. Her first moments on the station had been calm, her demeanor polite. And yet Thier's eyes had seen something else, something he had yet to fully comprehend. She had moved with purpose, her gaze always scanning, assessing. There was an intensity in her presence that unsettled him, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized. Humanity had been hiding its true nature in plain sight. As the chamber prepared for the next phase of the discussion, one thing was certain: nothing would be the same after this revelation. The true nature of humanity, a species capable of immense violence but choosing restraint, had been exposed. And now, the galaxy would have to decide how to respond. What would the future hold for a species that had mastered both peace and war, and which side of that duality would emerge victorious? As the Galactic Council sat in stunned silence, the weight of Thier's revelations hung heavy in the air. The unexpected depths of humanity's restraint had shaken every representative in the room. While the assembly absorbed the implications of Thier's assessment, another layer of truth was about to be uncovered. It came not from further analysis or debate, but from the unexpected arrival of Captain Alexandra Steele, a Marine, a symbol of human discipline and power. Her presence in the chamber had been unremarkable at first. She arrived like any other human delegate, with politeness and decorum, carrying herself with a calm professionalism that matched the other humans. But there was something about her that immediately unsettled Thier. It wasn't her outward behavior. It was something in the way she moved, in the deliberate precision of every action. Unlike the other humans who had interacted with the Council, Captain Steele's every step seemed to carry an unspoken weight, a potential for violence held in check. Thier recalled the first time he had watched her move through the station. While the other humans seemed to drift casually through the Cultural Exchange Center, Steele moved with purpose, her eyes constantly scanning the room. She analyzed the exits, the potential threats, the objects that could be used for defense. Thier had assumed, at first, that she was just another human being overly cautious, perhaps even paranoid. But it became clear that her behavior was no accident. When questioned about it, Steele had shrugged and simply said, "Better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it." It wasn't until a routine self-defense demonstration that the true extent of her training was revealed. Steele was assigned to teach a mixed group of alien species the basics of human martial arts, an art she performed with a level of skill and precision that left every observer in awe. The holographic display showed her movements, swift, controlled, but still restrained. She demonstrated techniques with such efficiency that it was hard to believe she wasn't holding back. And then, it happened. A Zanari student, in a moment of misjudgment, shattered a training crystal, sending sharp shards toward 3 other students. The scene unfolded in slow motion on the hologram, and Steele's reaction was instantaneous. She moved faster than anyone could have anticipated, her hand darting out to catch the largest shard inches from a Marxian's vital nerve cluster. In a single fluid motion, she pushed 2 students out of harm's way while simultaneously preventing the shard from reaching its target. The entire room was left speechless as Steele stood there, unaffected, calmly looking at the students she had just saved. Thier, still processing the event, asked her later about her extraordinary reaction time. Steele had responded with the kind of nonchalance that made Thier's scales itch. "Standard training," she had said. "Nothing special, just habit." She had moved slower than she was capable of, she explained, deliberately holding back to avoid alarming the Council. At first, the Council had dismissed her actions as an isolated incident. After all, she was a Marine, trained for such emergencies. But soon, a more unsettling truth began to emerge. The Council began to review footage of Steele's daily routine. What they found was both impressive and unnerving. Steele had maintained a physical regimen that far exceeded the normal expectations for human civilians. She had been training her body for combat since her youth, honing skills that could easily overpower any species the Council had encountered. But it wasn't just her physical capabilities that unnerved them. Steele's mindset was equally alarming. When asked about her reaction to dangerous situations, she spoke of her training in military terms. "We leave no one behind," she explained matter-of-factly, when describing her response to the coolant leak on the station that had threatened to destroy its primary reactor. In the face of toxic gas and imminent death, Steele had moved through the chaos with military precision, carrying injured aliens to safety while maintaining complete situational awareness. The footage showed her in the midst of the evacuation, her movements calculated and efficient, as if the deadly environment around her was no more dangerous than an ordinary drill. Even when the medical team found her, badly injured from the burns and chemical damage, she was still giving orders, coordinating efforts, and making decisions as if nothing had happened. When questioned about it, she had simply replied, "Marines leave no one behind." The Council watched in stunned silence as the implications of her actions began to settle in. It was only then that the true meaning of her earlier statement became clear. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. The humans did not just carry potential for violence. They had chosen to build their strength, to perfect it, and to wield it with calculated restraint. The more the Council learned about the human military, the more they realized that the peace they had witnessed was not born from a lack of capability. It was born from an unyielding decision to control it. Captain Steele, when questioned about the concept of war crimes, had shared her thoughts without hesitation. "There are lines we do not cross," she said. "No attacking civilians, no torture, no biological weapons. We have rules for warfare because without them, war stops being combat and becomes slaughter. We regulate warfare to maintain our humanity." Thear's scales rippled with unease as the gravity of her words settled over him. The holographic display shifted to a scene of Steele teaching human military tactics to a group of alien soldiers. Her style was methodical, her techniques effective and efficient. Every move, every word she spoke carried the weight of a species that understood violence better than any other. They had faced it, fought it, and learned to master it. And now they had chosen to use it only when absolutely necessary. As the Council deliberated on these new revelations, it became apparent that humanity was not the peaceful species they had first believed. They had not evolved beyond violence. They had learned to regulate it, to control it, and to direct it toward the protection of others, rather than domination. The Council had witnessed firsthand the capabilities of the human military and the chilling restraint they maintained. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ability to destroy. It was their decision to never use that power unless absolutely necessary. Thear's voice softened as he made his final observations. Captain Steele and humans like her are not the peaceful, naive creatures we thought them to be. They are a species that has perfected violence, but has chosen to turn away from it. And that, he concluded, is what makes them so terrifying. The council chamber had never felt so heavy. Thear's words echoed in the minds of every representative as they sat in stunned silence, trying to reconcile the peaceful, diplomatic humanity they had encountered with the cold, calculated violence they had just discovered. The humans were not naive, nor were they weak. They were a species that had learned the full extent of destruction, and yet chose to hold it in check. The implications of this revelation were vast and unsettling, and the council had no choice but to confront them. Thear paused, his voice betraying the uncertainty that had settled within him. What we learned from Captain Steele was more than just military strategy. It was an understanding that their peace is not a natural state, but a choice. A choice born of understanding the cost of violence and deciding, time and time again, to regulate it. The holographic display shifted once again, this time showing scenes of humanity's past, their world wars frozen in time. Images of bombed cities, devastated landscapes, fleets of aircraft darkening the skies, and soldiers marching into conflict. For the first time, the Council saw the full scope of humanity's history, not the sanitized version they had been shown during the initial contact, but the raw, unfiltered reality. Thea's voice faltered as he recalled the images of human warfare in its most brutal form. They have faced the horrors of war, he continued, and they have learned from it. The Geneva Conventions, these rules of warfare, were not created because humanity lacked the capacity for violence. They were created because they knew the full potential of their destructive power. They knew that without restraint, war becomes nothing but slaughter. The Council representatives watched as the hologram flickered, showing pages from human military manuals, training documents, and international treaties that outlined the specific rules of warfare. These were not just regulations. They were the result of centuries of conflict, of violence so immense that humanity had been forced to impose limits on themselves. These rules exist, Thier's voice dropped, not because they cannot commit these atrocities, but because they have done so in the past. They understand exactly how devastating they could be. A chill swept through the chamber. The Council representatives shifted uneasily, grappling with the realization that humans, far from being the docile, peaceful creatures they had imagined, were a species that had mastered war and violence and had chosen to limit their use of it. The true fear lay in the knowledge that humanity's restraint was not born from incapacity, but from their overwhelming understanding of the consequences. They could destroy with unparalleled efficiency, but they chose not to. The Zenari Elder, their crystalline form pulsing with distress, spoke up first. But why? Why choose restraint? Why not let your power be known? Let the galaxy see the extent of your might. Thiar glanced toward the Elder, his voice softening with respect. Because humanity does not want to dominate. They want to protect. They want to prevent war, not wage it. They understand that their greatest strength is their ability to avoid conflict, to keep the peace by being prepared for the worst. The hologram shifted once more, this time showing human peacekeeping missions, disaster response operations, and humanitarian efforts where the military had been deployed to rebuild, to help, and to protect. It was a startling contrast to the earlier images of destruction. These soldiers, fully armed, were now delivering medical supplies, evacuating civilians, and providing aid to struggling colonies. In every action, they demonstrated the same discipline and control they had shown during training, acting only when absolutely necessary, and always within the bounds of their rules of engagement. Captain Steele's philosophy, "If you want peace, prepare for war," was the guiding principle behind all of this. The humans had prepared for war, yes, but only so that they could prevent it. They were ready, not to conquer, but to protect. The Council had never seen a species like this before, a species that could unleash unimaginable destruction, yet chose to build bridges instead of walls. As the chamber watched the footage, a voice from the Mayan representative broke the silence. "Are you suggesting that we trust them with the future of the galaxy? That we allow them to help us prepare for threats, knowing what they are capable of?" Thiar's answer was firm. Yes, humanity has earned that trust. Their restraint is not a sign of weakness, but of profound wisdom. They understand the dangers of unchecked power, and they have chosen not to use it recklessly. Instead, they are using their capabilities to help us all. to teach us how to avoid the very conflicts they have spent centuries learning to control. The Zanari elder, still troubled, asked, "But if they possess this power, this capacity for destruction, and they maintain it willingly, does that not make them a threat in and of itself?" Thear thought for a moment before responding. "Yes, and that is why we must respect them. They are not a threat because they can destroy. They are a threat because they have the power to choose not to. And that, my esteemed colleagues, is the most dangerous kind of power there is." The council was left to ponder this as the hologram faded, leaving only the image of Captain Steele, standing calmly in the aftermath of a disaster, her military strength completely hidden beneath the veneer of peace. Her words from earlier resonated in the air. "We leave no one behind." She wasn't just talking about the people she had saved. She was talking about humanity's commitment to protecting others, to restraining their power for the greater good. The Council's decision was inevitable. They had no choice but to accept that humanity was unlike any species they had encountered before. A species that had not only mastered violence, but had chosen to master it for the sake of peace. Their role in the galaxy would be one of partnership, not dominance, as they helped to guide the future of the galaxy through the very restraint they had imposed upon themselves. The chamber of the Galactic Council remained quiet, the weight of Thear's revelations still hanging over every species present. The council members sat in their seats, their minds reeling from the knowledge they had just uncovered. Humanity, the peaceful species they had once considered harmless, was, in fact, a species that had perfected violence, yet chosen to wield it with restraint. The fear they had once felt was now tempered with awe and respect, but also a deep sense of unease. The implications of this discovery would reshape their understanding of the galaxy, of war, and of peace itself. Thear's voice was low, almost reverent, as he addressed the assembly once again. "We now see humanity for what it truly is. Not peaceful because they are incapable of violence, but peaceful because they have chosen it. Their greatest weapon is not their ability to fight, but their ability to control that very power." His words lingered in the room, echoing in the minds of every representative. The hologram flickered to life once again, showing humanity's ongoing peacekeeping missions. Human soldiers working alongside their alien counterparts to rebuild war-torn colonies, to deliver aid to those in need, to protect civilian populations from the ravages of conflict. These missions were not driven by a desire for conquest or power, but by a commitment to peace and security. The human soldiers, their faces serious but calm, carried the same discipline and control that Captain Steele had demonstrated, using their military expertise not to destroy, but to protect. "We have seen the power of their restraint," Thear continued. "Now we must recognize the value of their knowledge, their philosophy, and their willingness to share it with us." He paused, allowing the images of human peacekeepers working alongside the Council's forces to sink in. Humans have a unique understanding of conflict. They do not fight to dominate. They fight to ensure that others do not suffer the same horrors they have endured. The Council's representatives exchanged uneasy glances, each of them struggling to grasp the full implications of what Thear was saying. The more they learned about humanity, the more complex and paradoxical they seemed. They were a species capable of tremendous destruction, yet they had chosen to put in place strict guidelines to prevent that destruction. They were a species with the power to crush entire civilizations, yet they had committed themselves to cooperation and partnership. "But what does this mean for the future?" the Zanari elder finally asked, his crystalline form reflecting a deep shade of concern. "Can we trust them to continue on this path of restraint? How can we be certain that their power won't one day be used against us? Theor's upper eyes blinked thoughtfully as he considered the question. That is the challenge we face, he said. We must understand that humanity's peace is not an accident. It is a choice, a decision they make every day, a commitment to maintaining control over their own capacity for destruction. If they ever decide to break that commitment, the galaxy would be unprepared for the consequences. But the question is not whether we can trust them. The question is whether we can learn from them. The chamber fell silent again, as the council members grappled with the realization that humanity was not just a species they had to accommodate, but one they might have to learn from. They had always assumed that power was a threat, that dominance was the ultimate goal. But humanity had shown them that true strength lay not in the ability to dominate, but in the ability to choose not to. The Mirians, whose tentacles rippled in contemplation, spoke next. We have always believed that power must be displayed to be effective. We have always measured strength by the size of a weapon or the size of an army. But humans, he paused, his voice soft. Humans have shown us that strength is not just about force. It is about restraint, about knowing when to fight and when to stay your hand. The Nebulon representative, still processing the gravity of Theor's words, finally asked, "But can they maintain this restraint forever? Can they keep the peace when they are so capable of violence?" Theor turned his gaze toward the hologram once again, his voice calm, but filled with an undeniable certainty. They will maintain it as long as they choose to, and it is our responsibility as fellow members of this galaxy to support them in that choice. We must learn from humanity's example, not just in how to avoid war, but in how to protect one another without resorting to domination. As Theor spoke, the council members began to shift their thinking. They had come to see humanity not as a naive species in need of protection, but as a species that understood the complexities of peace and war better than any of them. Humanity had chosen to maintain their military strength not as a weapon of domination, but as a tool of protection. Their greatest strength lay not in their ability to destroy, but in their ability to control their power. The Council was slowly coming to the realization that humanity's influence in the galaxy would be profound. Not because they were the most powerful species, but because they understood the cost of power and had chosen not to use it recklessly. They were a species that could teach the galaxy a new way of thinking about strength, one that did not rely on fear or control, but on mutual respect and cooperation. "Perhaps," Theor said, his voice filled with both awe and respect, "we must redefine what it means to be strong. Perhaps true strength lies not in the ability to conquer, but in the ability to choose peace." The Council began to draft new policies for humanity's integration into the Galactic Council. A sense of cautious optimism spread through the chamber. Humanity's dual nature, its capacity for both violence and peace, had been revealed. The question now was not whether they would be a threat to the galaxy, but whether the galaxy was ready to embrace the lessons humanity had to offer. The Galactic Council's emergency session stretched late into the galactic night, as representatives from across the galaxy debated humanity's role in the future of interstellar relations. What had once seemed a routine discussion on a new species joining the ranks of galactic powers had turned into a full re-evaluation of the way the galaxy viewed strength, peace, and war. Humanity's complex dual nature had upended long-held beliefs, and now the Council was forced to reckon with the fact that their new allies were not what they had imagined. Theor sat silently at the head of the table, his eyes reflecting a mixture of admiration and caution. For all their sophistication, the Council had underestimated humanity's ability to wield their power with such profound restraint. The question was no longer whether humanity could be trusted, but whether the galaxy was ready for the kind of partnership humanity offered, and whether humanity's unique philosophy of restraint could actually reshape the future of the galaxy. A new hologram flickered to life in front of Theer, showing images from a joint exercise between human military forces and the Council's defense teams. Soldiers from multiple species, including humans, were participating in a simulated rescue mission. Human engineers coordinated with the Kraken warriors to construct a protective barrier around a simulated disaster zone, while human soldiers armed with full combat gear provided protection for civilian transport. The human forces, as always, operated with remarkable precision and efficiency. Their drills, while precise, never bordered on excessive force. They neutralized threats, repaired damaged infrastructure, and ensured that no lives were lost in the process. It was a stark contrast to the more aggressive combat tactics employed by other species, where victory was often marked by destruction. For the humans, the mission was a success, not because they had crushed their opponents, but because they had prevented harm and restored order. The hologram shifted to show human medics providing life-saving care to injured alien soldiers and civilians. The human medics worked tirelessly, their calm efficiency under pressure proving that their military skills extended beyond combat to saving lives. Once again, the question that had been plaguing the Council's minds since the revelation about humanity's restraint came to the forefront. Could they continue to choose peace when faced with the overwhelming potential for destruction? A Mayan representative, his tentacles coiling in thoughtful reflection, spoke first. "You are suggesting, High Counselor, that we not only accept humanity as equals, but that we allow them to guide our security protocols, our defense strategies. Can we truly rely on a species that has the power to wipe out entire worlds, but chooses instead to help us defend ours?" Theer's response was firm. Yes, humanity's power lies not in the destruction they could bring, but in their willingness to prevent it. They have the capability to strike down any who challenge them, yet they choose to offer partnership instead of dominance. We must recognize that their restraint is not weakness, it is strength. They have proven their value not by what they can do, but by what they have chosen not to do. The Council murmured in agreement, but there were still doubts. The Zenari Elder, always cautious in matters of security, interjected. But what happens when their restraint is tested? What if they are faced with an enemy who refuses peace? We have seen what they are capable of, but what if they no longer choose restraint? Thear nodded, understanding the concern. That is the risk we face. But I believe, based on everything we've learned, that humanity will always choose peace, at least as long as we uphold our commitment to that peace. They do not seek war, they seek stability and cooperation, but they are prepared to fight if it becomes necessary. As the conversation progressed, the Council began to reassess the role humanity would play in the galaxy. It was no longer just about trade or diplomacy. Humanity's willingness to bear the responsibility of their own power, to carry the weight of violence without using it recklessly, had made them invaluable allies. The Council had long operated under the assumption that power was to be feared and suppressed, that the strongest species should always dominate. Humanity had turned that idea on its head. They had shown that true strength came not from domination, but from control and restraint. Finally, the discussion came to a close, and Theer addressed the Council one last time. We find ourselves at a crossroads. Humanity has shown us a new path forward, one of mutual respect, of balance between strength and peace. They are not the harmless species we once thought them to be. They are something far more powerful. They are a species that has chosen peace, not because they cannot fight, but because they can, and choose not to. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. It is time we recognize humanity not just as a species that seeks to join the Council, but as a species that has the potential to reshape the future of the galaxy. Their influence will be profound, not through conquest or war, but through their capacity for restraint and their commitment to cooperation. This is the new balance of power. And we, as a council, must accept that humanity will be a key player in our shared future. And as the council members voted on humanity's official admission to the Galactic Council, it was clear that a new era had begun. The galaxy had shifted from a place where power was measured by dominance to a place where power was measured by restraint. And humanity, with its complicated blend of violence and peace, would be the guiding force in that new world.